Hello, and welcome to Paint the Past. I'm your host, Amaris. Today, I'm painting a little cup. It doesn't look like much at first. It's fairly small and kind of battered. But it's an interesting recent discovery, and it fills a gap in the understanding about culture on the farthest frontiers of the Roman Empire. The reference image I'm using is a virtual reconstruction of the cup produced by archaeological researchers. I'll include a link to their paper in the description below the video. This is the Berlanga Cup, and its story begins about as far from the Spanish farm where it was found as you can get. It's the year 122 CE. The Roman Emperor Hadrian has just toured the northern reaches of his province of Britannia, what we now call northern England, and he is not happy with what he sees. The frontier is messy. There are raids from unconquered tribes to the north, the Caledonians and the Picts. The boundary between Roman-controlled territory and whatever lies beyond is fuzzy, contested, and dangerous. So Hadrian does what Romans do. He builds something enormous. He orders the construction of a wall. Not a fence, not a ditch, a wall. Stone and turf, stretching 73 miles, or about 117 kilometers, from the River Tyne in the east all the way to the Solway Firth in the west. It takes around 6 years to build, with soldiers from 3 Roman legions doing the heavy lifting. When it's finished, it is the most heavily fortified military frontier in the entire Roman Empire, and it bisects the island we now call Great Britain from coast to coast. We call it Hadrian's Wall. Now, when most people picture Hadrian's Wall, they imagine Roman legionaries, those iconic soldiers with the red crests on their helmets. But here's the thing. The legions built the wall and then largely moved on. The people who actually lived on the wall, who staffed the forts, walked the patrols, and stared into the northern darkness every single night, those were auxiliary troops. Auxiliary troops were not Roman citizens. They were recruited from across the empire, from what's now Belgium, the Netherlands, Romania, Syria, North Africa, and yes, Spain. By the time Hadrian's Wall was fully garrisoned, something like 9,000 soldiers were stationed along it, drawn from probably 24 different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. The deal worked like this. You signed up for 25 years of service. In return, you got regular pay, food, equipment, and at the end of your service, assuming you survived, Roman citizenship and a plot of land. That citizenship wasn't just a piece of paper. It changed your legal status, your children's status, your ability to own property and enter contracts. It was life-changing. So a lot of men took the deal. These auxiliary regiments were typically around 600 men, about 480 infantry and 120 cavalry. And a key feature of Roman military policy was that you almost never served in your home region. The Romans understood quite well that soldiers are more loyal and less corruptible when they're far from home. So a unit recruited in northern Spain might end up in Britain. A unit from what's now Belgium might end up in North Africa. The empire was, in this sense, truly cosmopolitan, a vast shuffling of peoples across a connected world. The forts along Hadrian's Wall were not just military installations. Over time, each one developed a vicus, a civilian settlement, outside its gates. Merchants, tradespeople, the unofficial families of soldiers, local Britons looking for work or trade. All of these people clustered around the forts, creating small, messy, multicultural communities on the edge of the known world. So what was daily life like for a soldier on Hadrian's Wall? The honest answer is mostly boring, frequently cold, and occasionally terrifying. The climate of Northumberland is not kind. The wind comes in off the moors, the rain is persistent, and in winter, the stone forts would have been bitterly uncomfortable. We know this not just from inference, but because of one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Vindolanda tablets. Vindolanda is a fort just south of Hadrian's Wall, and its waterlogged, oxygen-poor soil preserved something remarkable. Over 1,700 thin wooden tablets, about the size of a modern postcard, covered in handwritten ink. These tablets date mostly from around 85 to 120 CE, just before and during the construction of the wall. They are the oldest surviving handwritten documents in Britain, and they are shockingly relatable. We're talking shopping lists, military reports, requests for leave, letters from home. One soldier writes to a friend complaining that his fellow soldiers have no beer and asking that some be sent immediately. Another document describes the local Britons in frankly disparaging terms, calling them Britunculi, which translates roughly as wretched little Britons. Roman soldiers, it turns out, could be uncharitable about the locals. And then there are the requests for clothing. Multiple tablets record soldiers asking their families to send more socks and underwear. One tablet, now quite famous, asks specifically for socks, 2 pairs of sandals, and 2 pairs of underpants. The cold was real, and the soldiers clearly were not above appealing to their families for relief. There's even archaeological evidence in the form of some of the largest Roman-era leather shoes ever found, unearthed at one of the wall forts called Magna, that soldiers were layering their socks inside their shoes to cope with the wet and cold. Socks and sandals were apparently completely normal on Hadrian's Wall. Fashion was clearly not the priority. The tablets also contain some heartwarming stories. Among the Vindolanda tablets, the most famous is a birthday invitation. Written around the year 100 CE, it was sent by a woman named Claudia Severa to her friend Sulpicia Lepidina. Severa was the wife of Aelius Brachus, a fort commander somewhere near Vindolanda. Lepidina was the wife of Flavius Cerealis, the commander at Vindolanda itself. The letter reads, and I'm going to quote this one in full. Claudia Severa to her Lepidina, greetings. On September the 11th, sister, for the day of the celebration of my birthday, I give you warm invitation to make sure that you come to us, to make the day more enjoyable for me by your arrival, if you are present. Give my greetings to your Cerealis. My Aelius and my little son send him their greetings. And then, in different handwriting, her own handwriting, added personally at the bottom right corner, she writes, I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to prosper, and hail. The formal body of the letter was dictated to a household scribe, as was the common practice, but those last lines, I shall expect you, sister, my dearest soul, those are Claudia Severa's own words in her own handwriting. This letter is now recognized as the earliest known example of handwriting in Latin by a woman anywhere in the Roman world. And it was written in a military fort in the north of England at the very edge of the empire, almost 2,000 years ago. That letter contains friendship, warmth, the anticipation of a celebration, a small son sending his greetings, 2 women far from wherever they originally came from, maintaining a social life and a friendship on a windswept frontier. It's not a document of empire or conquest or military strategy. It's a woman asking her best friend to come to her birthday party. And Lepidina very likely went. Let me come back to what I'm painting here, because to understand the Berlanga Cup, you need to know a little about the forts that are named on it. Hadrian's wall was punctuated by large forts, roughly every 5 miles, with smaller mile castles, little fortified gateways, every Roman mile, and watchtowers between each mile castle. The big forts were the hubs of garrison life. Each had barracks, a granary, a bathhouse, a commander's residence, workshops, and often a small hospital. The Berlanga Cup names 4 forts from the eastern section of the wall: Caelurnum, Ono, Vindobala, and Condorcom. Caelurnum is what we now call Chesters, a well-preserved fort where the wall crosses the river North Tyne, and which was home to a cavalry regiment. Ono corresponds to Halton Chesters, just east of Chesters. Vindobala is likely Rudchester, and Condorcom is now known as Benwell, close to modern Newcastle. These 4 forts would have been living, breathing communities, soldiers and their families, traders and craftspeople, shrines to Roman gods and local British deities side by side. The garrison culture was syncretic, absorbing local practices while maintaining Roman military discipline. And that brings us to the cup itself. The Berlanga Cup was found on farmland near Berlanga de Duero in the Castilian-Leonese province of Soria in central Spain, nearly 1,200 miles or about 2,000 kilometers from Hadrian's wall. It turned up in 4 fragments, partly deformed but mostly intact. Researchers created a high-resolution 3D digital reconstruction from the pieces, achieving sub-millimeter accuracy, and what emerged is the remarkable object that I'm painting. It's a hemispherical bronze cup, a type called a trulla, about 11 centimeters wide at the mouth and about 8 centimeters tall. Around its exterior rim runs a Latin inscription naming those 4 eastern forts. Below the inscription, 3 horizontal bands of enamel decoration depict stylized crenellated towers, a schematic representation of the wall itself, rendered in brilliant red, green, blue, and turquoise glass paste set into small cells cut on the bronze surface. The Berlanga Cup belongs to a small and specialized group of objects known as the Hadrian's Wall pans. The first of these, what we now call the Rudge Cup, was found in 1725, near the village of Froxfield in western England. A handful of similar objects have been found since, mostly in Britain and France. Before the Berlanga Cup, none of the known examples named forts from the eastern sector of the wall. This cup is the first. Scientific analysis of the bronze, using X-ray fluorescence and lead isotope testing, traced the metal to mines in northern England and Wales. The enamel techniques match known Roman-British practice from the 2nd century. The cup was made in Britain, almost certainly near the wall, and then traveled nearly 2,000 kilometers to a rural villa in central Spain. The research summarizing all of this was just published in 2026 in the journal Britannia. The scholarship is really fascinating because the researchers think they can trace the rough outline of the human story behind this object. The first cohort of Celtiberians was a Roman auxiliary unit recruited from the Celtiberian region of Hispania, which covered much of what is now the provinces of Soria, La Rioja, Zaragoza, Guadalajara, Teruel, and Cuenca in Spain. That is precisely the region where the Berlanga Cup was found. Historical records confirmed that this unit served in Britain, and archaeological evidence places Celtiberian units near Hadrian's Wall during the reigns of Trajan and Hadrian in the late 1st and early 2nd centuries CE. The most likely scenario, as the researchers lay it out in Britannia, is this. A soldier from the Celtiberian region served on the eastern section of Hadrian's Wall, at or near those 4 forts named on the cup. At the end of his service, he acquired this cup, either purchasing it as a personal souvenir or receiving it as a gift from superior officers or comrades, possibly in recognition of distinguished service. The inscription, with its 4 named forts, may have been customized and added after the cup was produced, a personalization, like having your name engraved on a retirement gift. Then he made the long journey home to Hispania, and he brought the cup with him. The discovery site appears to have been a Roman rural villa. Ground-penetrating radar revealed buried rectangular buildings with preserved paved floors that was active from the 1st through 4th centuries CE. This was not a poor man's homestead. This was the estate of someone with means, perhaps a veteran officer who had done well in service and returned home with his Roman citizenship, his savings, and his memories. The cup was a physical anchor for those memories. It depicted the wall that he had walked, the forts where he had eaten and drunk and stood watch, the comrades he had made and likely also lost. Its shape, a simple drinking vessel, not a weapon, not a trophy of conquest, suggests that what it was meant to commemorate was not glory, but belonging. The shared meals, the everyday camaraderie of garrison life, the particular quality of friendship that forms when you're far from home and dependent on the people around you. The researchers make a lovely observation in the Britannia paper. Souvenir objects were common throughout the Roman Empire. Tiny replicas of famous monuments, miniature versions of well-known statues, objects that let people who had been somewhere or who had served somewhere carry a piece of that place with them. Some of these objects even came with inscriptions acknowledging their modest nature, essentially the Roman equivalent of, "I went to Rome and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." But the Hadrian's Wall pans are a little different. They weren't just tourist trinkets. They were objects that commemorated years of service. They named specific places, specific forts, in a way that would have meaning only to someone who had been there. They were personal in a way that mass-produced souvenirs aren't. What's also significant is what the Berlanga Cup's existence tells us about the production of these objects. Until now, scholars had noted that all known wall pans, named for forts from the central or western sectors of the wall, and debated whether they were produced as a coordinated set, 1 cup per section, so to speak. The Berlanga Cup, with its eastern forts, breaks that theory. The evidence now points toward custom-made objects, produced individually for individual owners. You told the craftsman which forts mattered to you. You had your inscription added, and you walked out with something uniquely yours. That's a much more human story than a standardized commemorative set. It's remarkable how much we can infer about the owner of this cup. We have a man, we don't know his name, who grew up somewhere in the high, dry interior of Spain. He was recruited into a Roman auxiliary unit, marched north across Gaul, modern-day France, crossed the Channel, and ended up garrisoned on a stone wall in Northumberland. He would have spent years there. He was cold, almost certainly. He complained about the weather, probably like everyone did. He drank with his comrades in the fort's bathhouse or tavern. He stood watch over a landscape utterly unlike the one he grew up in. And then, when it was over, when he had done his 25 years and received his citizenship and been mustered out, he did not simply leave it all behind. He had a craftsman make him a cup that showed the wall, rendered in brilliant glass inlay in the colors of the Roman world, a cup that named the 4 forts where he had lived and served. He carried it home, 2,000 kilometers south, back to the land of his birth, to a comfortable villa in what had once been Celtiberia. He probably put it somewhere he could see it, a shelf or a table, some place where the light would catch the glass and the colors would come alive and he could remember. And then, somewhere in the slow collapse of the 4th century, the villa was abandoned and the cup was lost or buried, and the centuries piled up above it, and eventually the farmland covered everything. Until someone turned the soil at La Serrada de Arroyo in Berlanga de Duero, and 4 pieces of bronze came to light, and the colors, still brilliant after 1900 years, spoke to the people who found them. This is one of the reasons why I find ancient artifacts so compelling. As amazing and beautiful and interesting as the artifacts themselves sometimes are, you're not just looking at an object. You're seeing something that represents a story, in this case about a person, someone who lived a full, complicated life, who was cold in Northumberland and missed his home, but who also valued the friendships he made on the frontier enough to commission a physical record of them, and who carried that record 2,000 kilometers so it could sit on a shelf in his house in Spain. That man never imagined that 1900 years later, people would be marveling over his little cup. But here we are. Thanks for joining me to spend a few minutes patrolling Hadrian's Wall. I'll put links to the primary research in the description below. And if you want to go deeper on any of this, the Vindolanda Tablets online database is extraordinary. You can go read the actual texts of those letters, including Claudia Severa's birthday invitation, in both Latin and translated. Pretty cool. As always, I welcome your suggestions for future episodes in the comments section. See you next time!